Welcome back. We finally got a bit of good news. For anyone that doesn't know, Google was recently announced as a council member of the Hedera DLT platform. I recently did a video saying we should expect some news from the team that had been lacking in 2019, and that we might expect some new council members. The wait was actually longer than I expected, but the Hedera team obviously did not disappoint. I thought we might get some pretty impressive council members. After all, the council already had some pretty impressive names. But this is literally an order of magnitude larger than what I had in mind. Until the news hit, I wasn't expecting to do another Hedera video for some time. But the bull case for the HBAR writes itself at this point, and I couldn't miss the opportunity. I've actually said publicly that a big tech company might not be the best dream council member, because it could bring unwanted attention from the government. But now, when having to deal with it as a reality, I think it can only be a good thing, and here's why. Unlike with Facebook's Libra, which essentially was stopped via threats of legislation from Congress, Google is just joining a platform that was already established. There was no question that in the case of Libra, Facebook, the most unliked of the big tech companies, was the ringleader, and its cryptocurrency was meant to be a medium of exchange and competitor to the dollar. It's not surprising that the US government was not happy about this power grab by Facebook. On the other hand, Hedera's stated goal is far different than Facebook's cryptocurrency platform. They want to be the trust layer of the internet, and the Hashgraph consensus service, with all its potential, has been described mundanely as a decentralized notary. So even a tech company of this magnitude getting involved may be far less threatening to the powers that be. Next is the fact that the Google Council membership is only temporary, as with all council members except for Swirls, so they cannot serve more than 2 consecutive 3-year terms. But they can return upon taking 1 3-year term off with the approval of the remaining council members. When trying to determine the worst-case scenario of the addition, short of a much broader cryptocurrency crackdown, I only see the potential of Google and possibly other big tech companies being required to leave the council. But the cat will be out of the bag at that point, and the benefits can't be undone. We'll get into that in a minute. I don't want to downplay the weight of a council membership, though. They are more than just paper partnerships with no real commitment to build the network, such as the Ethereum Enterprise Alliance. The Hedera Council members are technical temporary owners of the platform, and sign contracts to help govern and develop the network. A company like Google undoubtedly did exhaustive research and due diligence before joining, and would not have signed without being ready to bring their considerable resources to bear. There were calls by FUD-slingers and misguided alike that Hedera was a scam as we went through a rough patch. And we continue to see attacks on Hedera, but the tone of these attacks has changed. Those putting out fear, uncertainty, and doubt about Hedera in the latter part of 2019 were gloating. Now FUD is strictly the result of fear. Fear from those who have become emotionally and financially involved in other platforms. I'd like to address some of the Hedera bashing in social media and that came from crypto news outlets directly. The first one coming from Bitcoinist.com. The title was, Hedera Hashgraph slumps 20% after meteoric rally. They focused on the 20% pullback when they could have just as easily entitled the story, Hedera up over 500% in the last month, on news tech giant Google joins council. The article contained what appeared to be a typo, showing the ticker as HBAD, and they called the announcement overhyped. In addition, the so-called journalist said, much like other crypto startups, Hedera Hashgraph has blown up the significance of using Google Cloud. This does not mean there's an official or explicit agreement between Google Inc. and the cryptocurrency network. At best, this statement is patently false and incompetent reporting. At worst, it's a lie. Frankly, I don't know what's more concerning. To set the record straight, Google Cloud put out the press release and will operate the Hedera node that council members are required to run. But the parent company Google is the entity that signed the council member contracts. The Bitcoinist went on to say that the price movement of the HBAR was an overreaction, and I'll address that soon. It's rare that the comments on a story are better than the story itself, but the Hedera community did not disappoint and corrected some of these errors in the comments section. If you read this story, it should be only to get context for the rebuttals found in the comments section. The next story comes from a slightly more respected crypto media outlet, CoinDesk. And the issues start with the title they chose. Hedera's token price spikes prematurely after Google joins the network's governing council. What the heck is premature about a crypto token's market cap increasing from 60 to 200 million on what is arguably the biggest news in crypto since Facebook's Libra? Actually, it should be considered bigger since Google is a larger company and Hedera is actually a functioning network with an actively traded token. CoinDesk even retracted a statement that it was Google Cloud and not Google that joined the council. This mistake can be found everywhere, but few retracted to CoinDesk's credit. Again, Google, not Google Cloud, joined the council. Also included in the CoinDesk article was this, an apparent quote from Google. "We're not providing material financial support, purchasing Hedera coins, or providing any other endorsement of Hedera's network or currency." Google also said it has no plans to use Hedera Consensus Service. Now I think it's fair to question anything in this article considering the clear bias, and getting this quote secondhand. But if we take it as truth, we also have to consider Google's motivation to downplay their involvement, considering what happened to Libra. I find it hard to believe that Google took the risk of entering the Wild West that is the crypto market for fun. But this is also supported by direct quotes from someone much closer to the Hedera Council than CoinDesk. I will let him further explain.
You're involved with discussions for potential members. What convinces them to join Hedera and take on this role in the council?
Council membership is really for a company that's already decided they want to use this network. That's the first thing I say to a company that's looking at this. We're not really out there recruiting companies who just want to be a part of the cool new thing. The governance responsibilities that council members have are important. We need to make sure that they're committed to the network, that they have self-interest in the success of the network. And the way the model works is they don't have a financial interest from the council. They're not going to make significant profits simply by being a council member or operating a node. We do think that's a cash positive proposition, but it's not. We designed that so that in itself is not the motivator. The motivation needs to be, I'm going to run applications on this network. I need this network to perform for me. It needs to serve my needs as someone who's utilizing a DLT. So that is what sells people on the council. Once they have decided Hedera is the network for them, these are the collection of features that they're looking for. Now it's kind of easy to look and say, well, I want to have my hand on the tiller. I want to make sure that I am steering the ship, that I am in more control of my destiny, and I can make proposals and argue for prioritization of the features that I most want, etc.
There are many other examples of poor reporting about this news. And the question is why? I think the answer is simple. They have connections to legacy platforms. Like most, these outlets are adverse to change. Bitcoinist.com connection is pretty obvious, and they might need to consider a name change if they want to shake this clear bias. And CoinDesk has close ties to Ethereum. While I don't hold tweets to the same journalistic integrity standards, this next piece of FUD is one of my favorites, for reasons that will become clear. Back in December 2019, Evan Ethereum ETH, or @EvanVanNess, wrote a Hedera bashing tweet that has since been deleted. But the essence was highlighting the fall of HBAR's price since open access of the Hedera network. I responded pointing out the similarities between the price action of the HBAR and that of Ethereum in the months following their respective launches. He responded that ETH's chart looked nothing like HBAR's. I'll let you be the judge, but I think the similarities are shocking all the way down to the networks launching 2 years after the prior crypto market peak, and the bull flag a few months before Bitcoin's halving, typically a time of general bullishness for the crypto market. In the months following Ethereum's bull flag, it rose 15 times, and over 1,000 times over the next 2 years. Time will tell what the HBAR will achieve. Unfortunately, I don't think most investors are researching and looking for new opportunities with an open mind. I think they skim these FUD articles and tweets to validate the investment decisions they have already made. Don't let that be you. I think the treatment of Hedera by the crypto media and broader crypto community is following Gandhi's quote. First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. They are making a weak attempt to fight. Fortunately for Hedera, whether the market realizes it or not, Google is like dropping an H-bomb on a non-nuclear adversary. After that, there really is no need to fight. I know most of you watch my videos for the investment draw of Hedera's cryptocurrency, the HBAR, and my gosh, did this announcement re-emphasize that point. So why did I say that the benefits can't be undone? Well, first, it's a vote of confidence by Alphabet that Hedera's tech is real, and the governance structure is sound. Market participants now know that even if Google were to leave the platform after their term or due to regulation, they are still likely developing on it. Next, the knock-on effects will be long-lasting. New potential council members will now feel more free to join following in the big dog's footsteps. Every added council member will bring new use cases, confidence, and bring the vision of Hedera one step closer to reality. Let's not forget about the little guy. Any developer or student who wants to one day work for or with Google will now become very interested in this new tech. But this is just one example. Interest in Hedera will skyrocket for countless reasons, and its developer community will expand significantly. Next, new large exchanges and fiat on-ramps will scramble to list the HBAR. They will not allow competitors to take all this action alone. Next, we have the additional coverage. Even if the mainstream hasn't comprehended the significance of Hedera yet, they will. In the spring of 2019, Facebook's Libra was announced and got anywhere from several minutes to hours of airtime a day for weeks, and not just on crypto news outlets, and not even just mainstream financial news outlets like CNBC or Bloomberg, but got its fair share of airtime on traditional news outlets. I don't know if we will get similar ongoing free advertising that Libra saw, but eventually it might be similar. I think in time we are going to have to watch the news networks trying to figure out what Hedera is, why Google and others are involved, how it differs from Facebook's Libra, and how the government and businesses will react. So let's take a look at Hedera's competition, and I'm going to stick with the top 10 because I think that's where Hedera will inevitably end up. I will use the market cap based on total supply simply because it's the easiest baseline. Now, I'm not bashing any of these platforms, but I encourage you to watch my previous bull case videos and do your own research to compare Hedera to each. At number 1, we have Bitcoin, which certainly has first mover advantage, but its technical limits likely will prevent mass adoption beyond a store of value. Not to mention, it's a disaster, like other proof-of-work platforms when it comes to environmental efficiency. I will say I also have my doubts about the digital gold narrative. I think any limited supply cryptocurrency could also serve this purpose. The main benefit Bitcoin has over other platforms is its censorship resistance. As in, there's no one really to go after if an entity doesn't like it. But I'm not sure that that's enough to prevent a governmental crackdown that impacts price. Bitcoin can't be stopped, but the price and value can be impacted. I'm not sure if Bitcoin's more defiant censorship resistance or Hedera's attempt at regulatory compliance will fare better during a governmental crackdown. I think there's a possibility it will be the latter. Secretary Mnuchin specifically said they didn't want to stifle innovation. And while Bitcoin represented a great innovation 10 years ago, it doesn't now. Hedera does. Next, we have Ethereum at number 2, which is making an attempt to become proof of stake and improve its technical specs. But that transition will be challenging, and it still will be light years behind Hedera. That said, it does have an edge in the stack of developers building on it, but of course, that can change. In at number 3 is Ripple XRP, which doesn't boast nearly the technical specs of Hedera despite being centralized. Also, what's interesting is since it has twice the supply, if you put it on par with Hedera, that would imply a price for the HBAR twice that of XRP, or about 60 cents. And to be clear, I don't put Hedera and XRP on par. I feel Hedera is far superior. The next 3 spots are just Bitcoin clones, or copies, in Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin Satoshi's Vision, and Litecoin. None offer real benefits over Bitcoin. Bitcoin Cash is dependent on Roger Ver's leadership. Litecoin on Charlie Lee's leadership, who sold his entire stake while wearing a HODL t-shirt, if I recall. And Bitcoin Satoshi's vision is dependent on Craig Wright being Satoshi himself, which in the unlikely event is true would be more of a negative for Bitcoin than a boon to BSV. Next, we have a stablecoin that has questionable backing, and even if properly collateralized, really is just the US dollar. I will be honest, I don't know much about EOS, except that it started with high hopes, and there has been some disappointment since. But I am far from an expert, so I defer to your research on this platform. I think BNB has the potential to appreciate, but in reality, it's just a loyalty program for a well-run company, nothing more. And rounding out the top 10 is Tezos. I think Tezos has entered the top 10 because, like Algorand, they are padding their staking rewards out of their treasury. This comes with a host of problems. First, it's unsustainable, and if value isn't built out on their networks, eventually the scheme will falter. Not to mention it could run afoul of securities laws. I don't think regulators would shut the platforms down. What is more likely is they would have to stop inflating their rewards. Hedera, on the other hand, will strictly pay the owners of HBAR out of fees. Thus, it can continue in perpetuity. I think if investors are honest and lay out the pros and cons of each platform, they will find that Hedera's potential future value should be as high or higher than any of them. Staking brings us to one of the more fair Hedera stories following the Google bombshell put out by Cointelegraph. It highlighted a report put out by Fundstrat. Fundstrat is Tom Lee's company, one of the most respected analysts on Wall Street, and they were one of the first to focus on cryptocurrency. Fundstrat's report forecasted that Hedera's revenue could hit $1.9 billion by 2024. This revenue represents fees generated on the network and split between the nodes and token holders for staking their tokens. Proxy staking is not available now, but is expected before the end of the year. The impact of this is staggering considering Hedera's current price. To explain this impact, we can equate that revenue to a company's revenue, and the token holder split to a company's earnings. If there's a 50-50 split between the token stakers and nodes, based on Fundstrat's prediction, token holders will be paid nearly $1 billion in 2024, which again we can equate to a company's earnings. If we apply a normal price-to-earnings ratio of an exciting and growing tech company such as Netflix or Tesla, the current market of Hedera of about $2 billion could explode to well over $100 billion based on this metric. What's more is now we're speaking Wall Street's language. One of the biggest complaints of financial analysts when trying to put a price on Bitcoin is they simply don't know how to value it. These sustainable revenue streams could solve that problem in the case of Hedera. I think we should also touch on a topic from the last video and discuss Hedera's network usage. The usage on mainnet has increased, but most of the interesting action has been occurring on testnet. The volume on the testnet until a few weeks ago was hovering between 10 and 30,000 transactions per day. Then they launched Hashgraph Consensus Service on testnet. Overnight, the testnet usage spiked into the millions, and on one day actually hit 24 million transactions. There are many resources on Hashgraph Consensus Service, and I have discussed it in the past, so I'm not going to discuss it now, but let's say that it's very exciting. Mance Harmon, the CEO of Hedera, claimed that large enterprises almost exclusively plan on using Hashgraph Consensus Service, and the spike in usage on testnet upon HCS launch shows someone is testing pretty heavily. What's more is Hashgraph Consensus Service has already launched on mainnet ahead of schedule. We are very far from it. I believe the HBAR is still dirt cheap. But I do think the price of HBAR will get ahead of the tech. So now is a perfect time to discuss manias, crypto bubbles, and maybe even discuss when to sell. Here's a quote from a Telegram chat room that inspired me to discuss this topic. I had seen this sentiment a few times from community members and wanted to address why I think it's so misguided. Let's start off going over why cryptocurrency has such a propensity to enter manias, and they tend to be so violent. First, cryptocurrency has a distinct new technology aspect, and new technology always has the potential to cause large investment bubbles. Railroads are a great example of an early technological bubble. Before the Civil War, there was an impressive 30,000 miles of track in the United States, but but by the turn of the century in 1900, there was over 200,000 miles of track as a result of investment dollars rushing towards this promising new industry. Railroads are often considered the first big business, and the largest companies of the time were mainly railroad companies. Automobiles are another instance where a new technology resulted in massive investment, and it caused General Motors to be the largest company in the world nearly every year between 1955 and 2000. Computers and the internet are another obvious example of how money can flood into a new technology, and resulted in a massive bubble in the 1990s and crash in 2000. Still, 7 of the 10 top companies in the world fall into this sector in 2020. One thing of note when it comes to the ascent of computers and the internet is it was much faster than the other two examples. Crypto has been, and will likely follow, an even more accelerated development and investment curve. But the internet revolutionized communication. Cryptocurrency is revolutionizing money. The internet made communication more efficient and added countless new use cases. Crypto does the same for money, and the impacts could be much more profound. I liken it to a gold rush, and the emotions that surrounded the famous gold rushes of history can't be overstated. That's what we're looking at when we discuss the bubble potential of cryptocurrency, the combination of a technological boom with a gold rush. I'm not trying to romanticize crypto bubbles, but there's no reason not to take advantage if you understand the dynamics and potential, and I certainly don't think we have seen the last of the crypto bubbles. The main thing when dealing with a bubble in an asset that you're invested in is to have a plan and stick with it. I will cover the sell portion of the dynamic investment program in a few months, which gives structure to divestment. That said, I think we're far from the point where most retail investors should be considering selling HBAR. I think most that have invested to this point should aim for the HBAR sale proceeds to be life-changing. Whether that's paying off a house, credit card, or student loan debt, or in rare cases an early retirement, when those goals are within reach, don't hesitate to sell. In the first Hedera bull case video, I said that the next big thing aura of Hedera would act as a tailwind. In the first few months after open access, the HBAR had a very different aura. But now, the next big thing appears to be a bit of an understatement. I mentioned in the past that Hedera might kick off the next alt season, and got my fair share of flack for it. Now I believe Hedera is the alt season. For those who have kept the faith, congratulations. But we still have a long road ahead. Thanks for watching, and good luck.